Chat is your channel to respond, and we speak English, but we might switch a little bit to German because we don't know the English words in this area, and we will help each other to find the right terms probably. So let's now start from content-wise. So I have two people here in my call I would like to introduce. First of all, we have Bettina, Professor Dr. Bettina Möllring, sorry, I speak English already, your name, from Muthesius University of Fine Arts and Design in Kiel. I know Bettina from my studies actually as an industrial designer. And Bettina, maybe you can tell us a little bit what brought you into teaching design work.
Yeah, yes, hello. Yeah, I just wanted to describe the different steps I've been taking through my career being a designer or studying. So yeah, as Jens said, I started studying in Berlin at the Hochschule der Künste in Berlin. And the main design attitude, which was in the group where I was studying, was that design is concept. So I think that was like the initiation of my, well, being a designer. And by that time, that was quite new. Today it's like, of course, there must be a concept within design. But when I went then, at the end of my studies in Berlin, I went for 2 years to London for a master course at the Royal College of Art. And by that time, it was there, design was very product orientated. And I would say design was by that time form and rendering and making flashy models. So then after that, I went back to Berlin and had after some time the possibility to go to Singapore. And was lecturing there for 1 year. And after the experience in London and then going to a completely different cultural context, I really had this feeling, or it really struck me that the cultural context is very important for design as well. So after that, that was in 2001 and 2. I went back again to Berlin. And then from 2006, I applied for a professorship there in Muthesius Kunsthochschule in Kiel. And since then, so my work is basically to teach the students, or to lecture or help the students to to understand the design process, so design as process, and then to find their individual way for this design process. So that's one thing. And the last thing I would like to say is that in the end, it's for now, it's, I think design shouldn't only like try to give answers. I think we have to ask questions. So that's for short.
Thank you, Bettina. Then we have on my screen right of Bettina, maybe different on yours, Professor Thomas Stegmann from Macromedia University of Applied Science in Berlin. Thomas brought you into design, teaching this work.
We all came from the same school, so we all studied in Hochschule der Künste, University of Fine Arts in Berlin. I then, and what I studied there was the first class that actually started to do with interaction design. So it was the class that was having actually a new tool, the computer, and try to kind of understand what that meant in design terms. After that, I went to London. I worked with IDEO for 4 years under Tim Brown, and then worked long-term in Hamburg in different kind of software companies and web consultancies. And I've been teaching now for 8 years, and I'm a professor since 6. And I was hired more or less to kind of teach design thinking and teach the changed approach that we now have to design. And that's and the reason why I teach is I just can't help it. I'm teaching if I'm paid for it or not. just my way of being. So.
Okay. Yeah, I met Thomas not at university, but although we studied at the same university here in Berlin, the University of Arts, but in a software company where I already worked in the digital area. And my idea to offer this talk was my teaching contexts mainly that I'm coaching and training people in design thinking. That was my work over the last about 10 years almost already, and very much focused on design thinking. But with this backing, originally I studied industrial design and communications, and then I worked in some design agencies. And I always found it a bit odd that in the design thinking community, we talk a lot about design thinking, but we don't talk so much where it comes from, because IDEO was originally an industrial design company too. And I see a lot of links, and what I wanted to explore with my colleagues here is what are the things that are still there that come probably from Bauhaus, and another station in this process is the Ulmer Hochschule für Gestaltung. We will talk about that too. What is relating, what is similar maybe, or what can be compared, and what is really different, and what might be missing today, or what can we learn from the past that can be part of our education around design thinking. That was the idea of this talk, and there we're going to start now, actually with explaining a little bit what teaching at Bauhaus and at Ulmer Hochschule für Gestaltung was about, what we know about it. It's a Werkstattgespräch. That means we have no really definite positions. We might develop it during the talk. And of course, you are invited to add your questions and comments during the talk to the chat. Okay, let me open the first picture that is kind of a discussion starter for us. We won't keep it on the screen the whole time, but, oops, sorry. So, but for a while to start the discussion, I hope you all see now a screen. Please give me a sign by the chat, if not, with a big circle, because it's a bit difficult in Zoom to monitor what's happening on the other side. A big circle saying building in the middle, and some people standing around there near the Bauhaus building. Not yet.
See it.
Okay.
No.
You can't see it? Okay.
No, I can't see it.
Bildschirm freigeben.
Neither can I.
Okay, once again. Ah, yeah, it's not right. Okay, no, now.
Yes.
Now?
Yes,
better?
that's better. That's good.
Okay, we always have to keep track on this, whether it works or not. Yes. What can we, maybe I first ask Bettina a little bit about it. What can we learn? What do we see here actually?
Yeah, so the diagram on the left is, or for me on the left, is my favorite. It's one of my favorite graphics, I would say. It shows the structure of the learning in at the Bauhaus. On the right side, we see some like iconic images of the Bauhaus. We see the Dessau building, and we see this this mysterious woman sitting in a Breuer chair, and we see the posse with only one woman, but a lot of men. And if you well, if you know people, you would spot, like, for example, Gropius, and I can see Moher-Notch and other people who are very famous in this context of the Bauhaus. And well, looking again to the diagram, the structure is that you go through the studies while going from the outside into the inside. So we have the basic course outside, and people come from outside into the Bauhaus and then work their way through to the middle. And in the center we see building, In German, it's it just says the Bau, der Bau, which is a bit different to building. So der Bau is more iconic. It's a place, it's a space, and it wasn't made or wasn't thought to be something only concrete. It's also about structures, I would say. One thing which is, I think, very important if you look at it is that we see a lot of things which are material. So, and it's, the Bauhaus was also about crafting. And there was a discussion, because design wasn't there until that time. So before there was only art. But then with industrialization, suddenly we had a new discussion about handwork and about craft, and also about production and how we can bring production into industry. So maybe that's enough.
I would take part of this discussion. So we agreed that we do a little science here when we want, because it's always difficult when we want to add something. Maybe for those of you who are not so much in the detail yet, just a little introduction to Bauhaus. It was actually the idea of a new way of education of artwork. So the traditional art academies, it was copying other art, but at the Bauhaus they started to say art starts with craftsmanship, and it's about working with materials. That's shown on this picture too. It says clay, stone, wood, metal, textile, or glass. And this basic course was very famous. Maybe some of you saw the TV series about Bauhaus. There were some very influential teachers that were all artist people, especially Johannes Itten, who was very influential here. And it was a course to develop your skills of creativity and of your personality as a creative person. It was not purpose driven in the beginning. This basic course was, I think, half a year or 1 year, and built on that you could do the next step. And in the beginning it was this craftsmanship dominated education, but it changed over time. And as Bettina said, it's I would say, yeah, when the first shift was from Weimar to Dessau, because Bauhaus changed its location, it became more towards industry. It was the society of industrialization at that time, the Roaring 20s. And it became something like one of the first design offices too, because in the workshops, they did prototyping. They called it, here in this chart, they called it testing site. But in the workshops, they built furniture and they built models for architecture. It was a lot of it was new. It didn't exist before, this kind of work for industrial purposes. Thomas, maybe I can bring in your perspective too.
I think it's I think the basic course is the big circle around everything is one thing that the Bauhaus, I think, has left to the future as a legacy. Most art schools have like a basic class now, and that wasn't really the case before. What I think is maybe more interesting to me is that the basic course got lost in Bauhaus over time. So by the end, they didn't do it any longer. That's one thing, because it really became more and more an industrial design and architecture school under Mies van der Rohe in the later years. But in the beginning, especially when Johannes Itten, because I saw the same movie, I think, he was really all about the artist, and he was about not pushing people into a mold, but letting people grow to become who they really were. And that was revolutionary and new, because before that, it was like Jens said, it was all about copying, and therefore developing step by step, have a slight new idea of how it could maybe done a little bit better. Bauhaus tried to be revolutionary new and tried to figure out how it could be done in a completely new way. And I think this is a really interesting parallel to today's design thinking, that this kind of, there was this revolutionary thinking in it. And it was like the old way, how we used to teach people isn't right anymore. And that was, at least at the beginning, I think one of the important points of Bauhaus. And maybe something that we can learn from that. Basic course, for example, I've seen in the wonderful exhibition in Berlin, in the Berlinische Galerie, there was loads of artifacts from the pupils in Bauhaus. And there were loads of drawings, and I've even seen pictures now of people doing two-handed drawings. And I find it really interesting. This is something that we do today in our classes in fashion design, that is still use the very same drawing techniques that have been taught in Bauhaus, and the same idea about learning how to make a shape your own. So that's what I find interesting.
That's for something else what struck me, because when we did the basic course in the industrial design at the University of Arts it's a long time ago, it was in the 80s. There was actually a basic course too, and the professor that teach us how to play with clay, how to play with wood. There were workshops in the university. I think they still have this, where you could work with silver, with metal, and so on. It was really great for me. And when I learned about it later, what Bauhaus was and what Ulmerhofische Gestaltung was, I thought, okay, it's still this concept of the Grundkurs here, at least in the classic design education in Germany, which did not really so much affect the design thinking community yet. Although I think there's a need to work with materials, or at least with the digital version of craftsmanship, with tools at least, which is not there. It's not there yet, really. We'll do some warm-ups and maybe things like this. I brought this from this exhibition too. Yeah, it's original Bauhaus Übungsbuch with all the Grundkursübungen, and I like this one especially. I don't know how to translate it. It's ice ballet on paper or so. So you really take a pencil and do some dots on the paper, and then you do this. Yeah, just like it's like meditation. And I remember sometimes I do similar things in workshops when people don't like to draw, because we need people that draw very often in our design thinking workshops. And I think Bauhaus can had in this exercises here in this book. We have, for example, 100 exercises to warm up and to train your creative skills. I think something like this would be interesting to emphasize more even today. Yeah, please bring in my discussion partners. Please just add and build on. I would not like to point on you every time I need your comments, because we wanted to simulate kind of talk show here.
So maybe just one thing before maybe then we switch to the HFG diagram.
Yes.
I think it's still, for me, the essence of what we have been talking right now is that we have a body, and we need to interact also with our body and to work with our body. So if we talk about crafting, you can always wonder whether how is the percentage between like technical and intellectual and crafting really. But in the end, I think the most important thing is that we really have to use ourselves as bodies or as persons and interact. I think that's for all of the schools we are talking now. So in the end, we also need in the design thinking, even if it works different to Bauhaus and HFG and other places where you can learn the methods of design, still we have to do things which sometimes we don't think they are like they go for an aim, but still you need them. So
okay, and okay, before we, yes, I will switch to the next one. Maybe one more point from my side. What I found very interesting too is this kind of naming, although they called in the later stage, in the middle stage, where Walter Gropius was the founder in a way of the Bauhaus as an architect, and in the second stage in Dessau, where the building was built that you see on the slide, he called, and when it was opening towards the industry, the manufacture companies and designing for them, at least furniture and things like that, he said, we are a laboratorium, a lab. And it's reminded me very much on nowadays, because I work in a lab here in Berlin. Today we think it's very digital, but at that time it was really prototyping with tools and with materials. But it has the same idea that it's just an early stage of a product that will be then mass manufactured later on. Okay, but now let's maybe switch a little bit to the next station of the story you would like to tell about what came out of the Bauhaus. A lot of people after the war went to the US, like Walter Gropius and Mies van der Rohe and Mohoi Nagy. And he even established Albers. He even established there a new way of teaching, which was called the New Bauhaus, and which was influential in America and the design schools too. So it spread there, but it stayed a bit in Germany too. And that's the next, which is not maybe so much known as the Bauhaus. Oops, sorry. We have only three pictures. So that's the second one. I apologize for the bad resolution, but it was the only visual which really showed the circle, the original circle, how it was created by the Ulmer Hochschule für Kunst. So what was the Ulmer, the HFG so-called, what was the HFG about? Any comments from my co-discussion partners?
Maybe I start. The really interesting thing is that they changed it around. So in the center now is the basic course. And then they don't have materials out anymore, but they have disciplines like architecture, product design, visual design, and information. And then the outside is the politics. And so they are not coming from the outside in, and the holy grail is a building, but now they are coming from, we are starting with foundation, and then we go over the disciplines in order to change the world. And that was the very different approach they had. At least that's my take on it. Maybe one sentence. All the teachers that we had in Berlin are teachers that had been educated in Ulm, and all the teachers that educated in Ulm came from the Bauhaus. So in a way, we are the grandchildren. And most German designers in some way are grandchildren in design teaching sense of the Bauhaus teachers.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that Bettina has a really interesting take on this as
well.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make some comments on the pictures. So I guess a lot of you know the so-called Schneewittchen-Sarg, which is like an iconic thing or iconic design of the HFG. It's quite early. To be honest, I don't know.
You mean the audio in the right corner, yeah? Right.
Yeah, the hi-fi thing with with the records. A lot of people don't know anymore what records are, but anyway, yeah, that's true. I've experienced it. So, but if we compare to the Bauhaus, as the Bauhaus had their iconic building and their own school, a large school in Dessau, the same happened with Ulm. So the HFG was founded, and there was a lot of money coming from America, and they were building just from the beginning. They were building their own house, their own university, and they also had like iconic places for the students, and also for the teaching, for the professors or for the teachers. So there's a parallel thing. And then there are also, if you see this Kanne, how's that called?
Coffee can, or
yeah,
no,
so
can is wrong. Coffee thing.
but this is a part of a whole system. So I think that's something very important, that HFG was, the Hochschule für Gestaltung in Ulm was very structured, and they did everything, like molded it into systems. So this coffee can is part of an entire world of everything you would need in a hotel or in a restaurant. So it's able to stack. You have dimensions or proportions which fit together, and so it's also a system. It's like a family, a product family. So that's something new. And then I also would like to comment on what Thomas said already, that we have like sociology and politics and psychology and so on. So from Bauhaus, coming from Bauhaus, where we said art and technique is the new unity, or the new the core. It still in Ulm at the HFG, there was a lot of more scientific thinking, and like also new scientific areas like sociology has been, like in the beginning of the 20th centuries, was sort of getting very important. And also like psychology was a sort of new Wissenschaft, science. And so it was also like new or different anchor points into other fields of thinking and working.
Yeah, I would like to point out here again a little bit the context. The Bauhaus was founded after the First World War, and it was another moment of we want to have something new. And it was the beginning of the Roaring 20s, and then it was just in the midst of that, with this idea of, for the masses, we do products for the masses, good products for the masses, new ways of building, Licht, Luft, Sonne, as the architect said. You have some of these buildings from influenced by the Bauhaus ideas here in Berlin, for example, Hufeisensiedlung, if you know this, Bruno Taut. And then the Ulmer Hochschule für Gestaltung was founded originally by the sister of Sophie Scholl, which was murdered by the Nazis, and her sister wanted to found something, an educational institution, to have new ways of thinking in politics and humanities. And originally, because she got to know Max Bill, which was one of the teachers of the Bauhaus, it became more the idea of a school for design and architecture. So it then became something like the first educational entity to educate designers as we know it today, because in Bauhaus was not so clear design profession is, or we would call it design today. It was not at that time so much the term yet, but here it became that, and it was starting with the same people, like Max Bill was more an artist, and Johannes Itten and Josef Albers did some of the first courses, which were teachers at the Bauhaus too. But then what Bettina pointed out, then it became more for a while this more scientific driven industrial design process. But the way of educating was similar. People lived on the campus and they shared a lot together. It was really like Bauhaus was similar, as far as I know, a very strong community, and was not only about doing the pure pure studies, but to live together and to develop an attitude. And maybe this to do the dots a little bit with thinking. I mean, both of them, which was new, had project work. So that means you have some basic capabilities, but then you do a project. It was not called a project, was called differently. I think at Ulm it was already called a project, but at Bauhaus was a different term for this. So working practically to prototype something as a as something that is your main task, and it was still part of my studies. You had this basic courses and you had your project, and you have this nowadays in a lot of studies, and especially in design thinking, it's just all built on projects as far as I understand. You mean the current Bauhaus school? Which courses Bauhaus offers for design something? No, it's, sorry, we are only talking about the history. I pick here a question from the chat, which courses Bauhaus offers for design. We don't know this because there's still a Bauhaus now, an entity, but it's not a proper university anymore. We are just relating our talk to the historic Bauhaus, which doesn't exist anymore since 1933. So we don't know about.
To answer the question is,
yeah.
I'm sure I leave something, but it was like metal workshop, and then it was wood, and so in the beginning, or for the whole time, basically it was like you just went in, and it was basically all the same. At the beginning, it was more like design and products, and later it turned more into what it's Bauhaus for Germans. Whatever.
In German
understand is that it's about architecture. So it's design in whole, and towards the end it was more about architecture, if you talk about departments or whatever. And what I wanted to point out again is that when the Bauhaus was working, there was an industry, but the way how to I'm sorry, I can't see you anymore, so somebody else has to talk.
Okay, Thomas.
Yeah, I'm happy to take over. So I think ultimately we are here to kind of talk about the connection between design thinking today and inspirations, I think, from Bauhaus potentially coming over Bauhaus, or the way how Bauhaus taught students is only partly applicable today, and in a way it's not even related properly to design thinking. If you see, this is like the circle of the Bauhaus, and then in front of it the circle of the Ulm, Hochschule in Ulm. The design thinking just goes almost vertically through them, because it doesn't really matter. Design thinking doesn't care about craft, which I think is really interesting. At least it doesn't say it. It talks in prototyping about it, but it's not, the design thinking process doesn't even deal with it, which I think is interesting.
Okay, but maybe then that's the right moment. That's why I changed the screen, the picture, the third picture we have here about design thinking, and I think we have about 10 minutes left to pick up this a little bit and elaborate a little bit on design thinking, what I know about the history of design thinking. You see here, hopefully on this picture on the left down corner, this Business Week title, The Power of Design, was from 2004. And the big story says that Hasso Plattner, which is the guy right of this, the leader of German software company SAP, saw this article and read this in the plane, and that's the story at least, and said, I have to get to know these guys. They should help me to make SAP more user-centric, our products more user-centric, more usable. We need this. And then they started to work together, and still I know some reports from SAP, they still struggle with it. They have their waves of we have more focus on users, and then less again, more business again, and more users again. So they have a long story now about introducing this mindset into their company. And it was driven, and that's where my link is, it was driven by making the products better, but these were software products. And this is my thesis here, that design thinking found his trigger in the traditional industrial design area, because the company, which was represented by Tim Brown and Tom Kelly, the two guys on the title of this magazine, that was IDEO, that was an industrial design company. Tom Kelly was a electric engineer by education, and he did an extra study about design at the Stanford University. I think that was the story. So, and then they became, by the digitalization of the early one and the work for digital topics, they became more aware of the specifics of what digital needs. It's my assumption, at least. And you see this little laptop here on the picture, which is from Bill, the design from Bill Moggridge, a British British designer and educator as well. And he was a co-founder of IDEO. And other stories of IDEO, this agency says they worked early for the Apple mouse. They made it better, although they didn't invent it. Maybe Thomas has some stories of IDEO because he worked there. But IDEO was, for me, the link of the traditional industrial design thinking and education and the things that they were doing to design thinking, because on some point, and triggered by digitalization, they found it has to be more interdisciplinary. It's not possible to just one person is designing everything. It needs an interdisciplinary approach, and this has to be taught. And that's where, to my opinion, design thinking emerged from. Maybe some additions to this.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was lost.
Bettina.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's maybe I just come back to the point I was making, that we have to see the development of design and also design teaching. There is a big link to industrialization and so on. So just to come back, Bauhaus was sort of the beginning of the industrialization, and then HFG was really in the middle of consumerism, and and now we have with the design thinking, there is again another industry. So what happened with, for example, with what Jens talked about, the work of Bill Moggridge and his the first laptop, so to say. So there was a completely different topic was coming into design, which is interface, is interaction. Beforehand in the Bauhaus we had concrete products, and you could see and you can see and feel them as straightforward things. There was nothing behind it, and when IDEO came into, or when interaction and interface and computing and so on were sort of developed, then there was the inner things, the working, the function, the programming and so on, which you couldn't see, was the main thing. So it was a massive change of topics and of things you had to think of. So I think you have to keep that in mind. And just one thing, because I like the other diagram so much, and to find this little circles, the 6 circles of the design thinking, which is nice that we have like sort of all these bubbles and their configurations in different forms. So Bauhaus coming from inside to the from the outside to the inside, then the HFG from the center, then through the departments into science. And now we have like steps which come each by each after each another, but still you have these loops. And I think that's, for me as designer and teacher, this is something I think that's very important to understand, that you have a process, but you can always, you always have to go also back or skip something and go forward. So it's a free like the ice skating drawings in a way, yeah, which Jens just showed us before. Yeah, it's another structure and it's another way of working, really.
Then maybe just a question. What do we think can we take out of the history of Bauhaus and apply to modern design thinking? So can we make design thinking better by looking in the past? And I think I have one example I'd like to push there. Bauhaus in the very beginning was just about finding your footing again after World War I, which was changing or destroying the known world for most people. We don't have this similar situation. However, we are also in a crisis situation. I'm not talking about Corona only, I'm talking about climate change. I'm talking about we are facing crisis. And the interesting thing is that design, especially in Ulm, was all about just being part in a consumeristic world and playing this role in selling more products. Today, selling more design. What is interesting that IDEO or design thinking companies increasingly start actually putting social elements in it. For the early Bauhaus was also about making design for the masses, right? It was about, they never achieved it because it was, the taste levels of the Bauhaus were so advanced that normal people simply didn't like it and also couldn't afford it. But now they try to kind of do something that then much later on became furniture and design for the masses. And in a way, design thinking now also needs to, or could, take this revolutionary spirit from the Bauhaus and try to kind of make design thinking and change it to make the world a better place now, to deal with climate crisis, to deal with the current Corona issues that are multiple. Kind of, we have this. I think we have a point in time which has some similarities, and we can use some of the spirit of the old times to apply it to our modern design thinking.
Okay, I would like to point out on these links from my side as well. I think what is a similarity, what was new in the whole education about art or design work was that you integrate different disciplines, at least I think the project work, as I call it. That was already starting at the Bauhaus. It was much more developed in the Ulmer Hochschule für Gestaltung and towards a new profession called the designer. And with design thinking, actually, I know the education at the D School here in Potsdam, and it's, to my opinion, it's all built on project work, on practical work in a team to have first a short project and a longer one and the next one. And during the project, you can do little additional courses, but mainly it's expected that you somehow find yourself how you do this. So this is similar, but what is different, to point this out again, is this craftsmanship, and in the modern world, I would say digital craftsmanship. This is nothing that is so far, as I know, is not part of the education in design thinking, but I think it could benefit from it, especially in this basic course stuff, which we a little bit find again, or still find now, in what we call warm-ups. We call it always warm-ups, and we say, okay, it's just to bring people. But when you do it more often, you want to connect the warm-up to a specific activity. And when, for example, you do drawing after this or prototyping with some materials, it's good that you do warm-up around these materials so that you have some craftsmanship to work with these. I think we could include this more in our educational idea of design thinking, which was very much driven besides by digitalization. Not only that Hasso Plattner from SAP gave the money for the D schools, but things like in 2007 came the iPhone, and after this was still a big increase of design thinking as topic, and it's still on the go now. And I think the explanation is that we are still in this digitalization. It takes still a long time till we see it as, sorry, Bettina, I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one last remark. I think it's important to know that Bauhaus and also the Hochschule für Gestaltung in Ulm there were schools, it were colleges or universities, as you would like to say. And design thinking is a method. And it's also
school too.
It's a school now, yeah. But from the beginning, it's and still, you come together in teams. You bring teams together or people together, and then work for at least a shorter time than a study. So that's what I want to say. And it's also design thinking is more really for just doing it straight away. So then, for example, in universities, you can also go la 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 and do a lot more experimenting and so on. So there's more free space. Maybe that's something you could also think about. How could we implement more experimenting, more freedom in a way? Then so I mean, I remember that you have been, when I've invited you to Kiel to work with my students. It was always like go, which is good.
Action,
yeah,
momentum,
action and so on. But sometimes it's nice also to have the opportunity to explore, yeah, or to do something which might not aim directly to what you need. You know, that's something I just wanted to say.
Okay.
Okay.
So we have about 5 minutes left officially, and some people will step out of the next session already. So I would ask you maybe for your last sentence, maybe I can do something like this. Design thinking can learn from Bauhaus that. Maybe you can add to that sentence as a last statement.
Bauhaus,
Design thinkers nowadays can learn from Bauhaus and Ulmer Hochschule für Gestaltung that, and complete the sentence.
Okay. Wow, okay. What can you learn? No, I'm just...
That's right.
Yeah, I'll do maybe after Thomas.
I think design think Bauhaus put for the first time the individual in the center, which didn't really happen before that much. It was about copying a master. Now it was about yourself. And I think that design thinking as a main method is in a lot of cases not working that well. I think design thinking needs to focus again on individuals and people, and in order to enable individuals to shine their best. And that is the promise that design thinking sometimes can deliver. And if it does, you have really cool and interesting results.
Bettina, something to add from your side?
No, thank you.
No advice for the design thinkers. So then I do myself. I would say design thinkers can learn from Bauhaus and für Gestaltung that some craftsmanship, ever it's digital or analog, can help to have better results, and that, yeah, I think that's the main point I see, that this can help, and I really would elaborate this usage of digital tools and analog materials helps to, the other point was we can learn from them how to develop what the ideal people call creative confidence. That means in this basic work with materials and with testing out without purpose, you can develop what is in you as a creative person, because we assume it's in everybody, but you have to practice it a little bit. And that's what we can learn from the old days. Okay, saying this, I would say thank you to all our listeners, and especially, of course, to Bettina and to Thomas for joining me in this discussion. To get a little bit of feedback, I would ask all of you maybe to think about shortly what you would type as a feedback, and all in once, when I do a countdown, put it there, and then we say stop. So I said, think about something what you would do in the chat. 1, 2, 3, now.